In iOS 13, Apple provided a whole new framework to do background processing in your application. Background Tasks framework is a whole new framework that will enable you to launch background processing and handle tasks. You are also going to explore processing tasks, which enable you to run longer processing tasks that require additional power. Utilizing background tasks means you have to declare this new permission both to Apple and your customers. Because using background tasks is something that your user must know about. This is to protect both your users from unknowingly having your app launched in the background. Therefore, we need to specify in Xcode our new capabilities. You'll probably be familiar with this process. It's the same process you would do for enabling things like push notifications. Start by opening the sample project. Now, go ahead and tap on the sample project file. Click on Sign in and capabilities, and finally, go ahead and enable background fetch and background processing. This will enable your project to start accessing the framework. It will also add those required access fields to the info.plist file. Background Tasks framework requires you to register every background task that you would like to use. You do this via identifiers and passing this to the framework. You also need to declare these identifiers inside the info.plist file. Open the info.plist file and add two new identifiers. The new key in the info.plist file is called Permitted Background Task Scheduler Identifiers. This is an array of identifiers that you would like to use in your app. This allows Apple to know exactly what identifiers we plan on using for background tasks. Expand the array of identifiers and click the plus sign to add a new item to the array. Our first identifier is going to be com.ray.backgroundtasks.fetch. Next to the first identifier, click the plus sign again. Our second identifier is going to be com.ray.backgroundtasks.processing. These are your two identifiers to use in the background tasks framework. Open Music List View Controller and let's start by importing the framework. Import background tasks. Then let's add two new constants for our background tasks identifiers. Underneath our music titles array, let's start with private let task identifier equals com.ray.backgroundtasks.fetch. If you remember, this is the same identifier we registered in the info.plist file. Next, we're going to add another constant, private let task identifier processing equals com.ray.backgroundtasks.processing. Again, this matches the same identifier in the info.plist file. To start using background tasks, we have to register with the BG Task Scheduler. This is a function and a shared singleton inside the background tasks framework. We are going to add these within the viewDidLoad function. Start by accessing the BG Task Scheduler .shared, which is the shared scheduler instance, .register. For task with identifier is going to be our task identifier we registered earlier using dispatch queue dot global, and finally we're going to go inside the launch handler, which gives us the current task and the code that we want to execute. For now, let's add a comment. Code to be added. You are now going to repeat this for our task identifier processing. Again, we're going to access the BG task scheduler .shared .register. This time we're going to use our task identifier processing constant with the same dispatch queue .global. And finally, we're going to go into the launch handler with our task and just add code to be added. Remember that you can only schedule a job once. You have to schedule it every time if you want to run it periodically. Your background task is going to hit the API and download an updated list from the iTunes API so that when a user returns, they can see the latest music very quickly. In this episode, you are going to write the logic to handle the refresh. You are going to create a new function that will schedule the app refresh. Directly underneath the download music titles function, go ahead and let's create a new private function called schedule app refresh. In this function, we need a do catch. We're going to create a new request which equals a BG app refresh task request, which requires us to pass in the identifier. Then we're going to set the request's earliest begin date. This is the earliest date and time at which to run the task. Equals date, time interval since now, 3600. Then we're going to try BG task scheduler .shared .submit with the request above. And then finally, we're going to catch and print error if we have one. Finally, we need a new function that will do the app refreshing. We're going to create a new private function called handle app refresh, and we're going to take in the task, which is the BG task. We're going to start by creating a new operation queue. The queue's max concurrent operation count is 1. And then we're going to create an app refresh operation equals block operation, and that's going to execute self.download music titles. Next, we're going to add the operation to the operation queue. Below this, we're going to call task expiration handler, which is a handler called shortly before the task's background expires. And we're going to call queue.cancel all operations. Below this, we're going to create the last operation equals queue.operations.last. And on the last operations completion block, we want to call task set task completed, and the success is going to be the last operation dot is cancelled, and we're going to default to false. And then finally, we're going to call the schedule app refresh function. Essentially, background tasks requires an operation to to be put on the operation queue so that it can execute in the background. As you can see, this will eventually call our self.download music titles function.